Fantasy Focus Football is presented by Geico. Insurance can be hard. That's why Geico makes it easy with 24/7 claim service and on-the-go policy info in the app. It's easy to Geico. Happy December. It's Friday, December 1st. Field Yates and Stephania Bell here. Good morning to you, Stephania.
Good morning, Phil.
Can you believe we've made it to December? We have 5 weeks left after this in the NFL regular season. Where did the time go?
It's both weird and surprising that there's 5 weeks left because it feels like it's been long.
Yeah.
Like judging from my fatigue rate as the season goes on. But yet I was like, there's still 5 weeks.
There's still 5 weeks.
Still 5 weeks.
Yeah. And for those that grind it out all the way through the playoffs, there's still another 5 weeks after that. Your fatigue is not showing for the record at all, Stephania. You continue to power along like you are a well-oiled machine.
You know, I'm a little bit tired because I got to keep up with the Mike Clay darts that he's throwing outside the podcast.
Explain.
Because, game of the century.
Yeah.
Pretty much happening
Maybe
this weekend.
of the universe, of eternity.
That being the 49ers at the Eagles. I think he's salty because the 49ers are favored.
Kyle
Shanahan said
on the road.
He does not understand how that works. He is surprised they're favored. I like that we're staying humble. Mike Clay, not so much.
Do you have a wager with Mike Clay?
Not yet.
Okay, that has to be determined, and I'm saying this right now. A wager between your 49ers and Mike Clay's Eagles must be determined by the start of Fantasy Football Now, Sunday morning, 10 a.m. Eastern Time on ESPN2. There you have it. We've got a lot to get to, including a very, very fun Thursday night football game between the Cowboys and the Seahawks last night. But, of course, with Stephania here, we need the updated latest on injuries around the NFL. And we start all the way out in Los Angeles, Stephania. The Chargers have no receivers besides Keenan Allen. Are they going to have Keenan Allen this week, though?
And also a guy who plays through injury on the regular. We already saw that he had an AC sprain that he has played through. Now he's dealing with a quad injury. And, after last year's hamstring issue, which cost him multiple weeks, you would not expect him to do anything that could potentially set him back. But here's the good news. Even though he hasn't been practicing, been working out on the side, in shorts, running, sounds like they're feeling pretty positive about his availability. We're recording this Friday morning, so Friday practice will be a big deal. But it sounds very positive for Keenan Allen.
They travel across the country to New England. Of course, they would have to rule him out if he does not get on the plane. We'll have clarity by Sunday morning, I would think. But Keenan Allen, definitely a gamer. If he's unavailable, good luck. I don't know what to tell you. Maybe Jaylen Guyton, if you're feeling super frisky, we'll address that on Fantasy Football Now on Sunday. Tank Dell Stephania popped up on the injury report on Wednesday. What's going on with him and that calf?
Dealing with a calf strain. Now, they did put him through imaging. It sounds like they think it's minor. DeMeco Ryans sounded optimistic, hopeful that they would have him available this week. He's had 5 touchdowns in the last 4 games. Kind of important. And remember, they've been without Noah Brown for 2 games because he, too's been dealing with an injury. And it sounds like they're maybe a little bit hopeful that they could get Noah Brown as well. Do you realize that they only have had all 4 of their receivers, if we include Robert Woods in the mix, in week 1?
Week 1, that's it, huh?
Week 1.
And at that point, that group of 4 receivers was not what we think it can be right now. So it has been a lot of success, despite a lot of absences over the past month and a half for C.J. Stroud. Good news there on Tank Dell. Sounds like Dalton Schultz is going to be very iffy for this one on Sunday.
Yeah, he's the one I think is most questionable.
I've said this several times. I'll say it again on this podcast. DeMeco Ryans is if you don't practice, you don't typically play kind of guy. He's the anti-Pete Carroll. So if a guy misses all 3 practices during the week, you can all but rule him out. If he misses 2 out of 3, still makes me a little bit nervous. Let's go to New Orleans, Stephania, where they are very thin. They're like the Chargers. They're the Spider-Man meme right now. Who is available amongst their wide receivers? Because both Chris Olave and Rashee Rice have been on the injury report this week. What do we know?
We know that Chris Olave is in the concussion protocol, but the good news for him is that he was participating even in individual drills on Wednesday. So early signs of him being out on the field, limited practice Wednesday and Thursday, obviously would need to move through the 5 phases of the concussion protocol and also get the INC clearance if he were to be eligible to return. So we'll be following that potentially up through Saturday. And then Rashee Rice has a quad injury left in the second quarter. Does not sound good for him. Have not seen hide nor hair from him at practice this week. Who's going to catch passes? It might not be a wide receiver. I mean, there's A.T. Perry, who's had a couple big plays, but It could be Juwan Johnson.
Juwan Johnson. We'll talk about him more later on in the show.
And Michael Thomas out on IR. So, as you mentioned, but their two tight ends, Taysom Hill and Juwan Johnson, might be more interesting.
Marquez Callaway also added to the practice squad recently. A blast from the past. We could have Marquez Callaway and Jimmy Graham making strides for the New Orleans Saints on Sunday. We go to Arizona, Stephania, where yesterday we got news that Zach Ertz was granted his release after he requested it. And that was not the only tight end news out there in the desert, as Trey McBride also dealing with an injury. What's going on with he and Hollywood Brown?
Yeah, Trey McBride has a groin injury, and this one is a little bit concerning. Didn't practice Wednesday, limited on Thursday. Obviously, he's been a big factor in the passing game, which is why they felt so comfortable moving on from Zach Ertz. But keep in mind, the Cardinals are one of the remaining two teams that has not had their bye yet, and they have it in Week 14. So I wouldn't be surprised with a soft tissue injury to somebody who's important to them that they may end up holding him out this week. Hollywood Brown played through the heel injury that he was dealing with last week and had the most targets he's had all year, like finally looking like he and his buddy Kyler Murray are getting back in sync. So I'm not as worried about him, even though he didn't practice, listed as a DNP. I think he'll end up playing.
You pay attention to this stuff a lot more than I do. I know that reporters did not see Trey McBride, but he ended up registering a limited participation practice. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct. Reportedly did something in drills. I think, when people don't see them, it's hard to judge like how engaged were they, because as we've talked about, limited can be like 2 or 3 things that you do, or limited can be 75% of the practice.
Right. Yeah, there's quite a wide range there for a limited practice in the NFL. Monday Night Football makes things complicated, Stephania, especially when you're a star like Travis Etienne. What's going on with him?
It was originally called a chest injury. Then it was later changed to a rib injury. And he's been called day to day, but he did play through this. So that's one good sign, was he was able to play through it. The fact that they get an extra day on Monday, we really only have that Thursday report because, as you mentioned, it's a Monday night game. Limited, but it sounds like the team feels pretty good about his status for Monday night. Also
limited. Is that correct? Is that what you said? Okay.
Yes.
Another one where, again, I'm not trying to begrudge the reporters, but this was one where he was not spotted.
You're right.
By the reporters at practice. So when that's the case, it leaves some open for interpretation of just how limited the player was or was not.
But I
that's
think
good
what
context.
you can take away is the fact that he continued and played through it doesn't mean they're concerned. Some rib injuries, they're very concerned about the potential for further injury. Does not sound like that's a worry here. So it's a pain tolerance issue. Makes you feel much better about his chances.
In the interest of time, we'll table it for now because it sounds like ETN has a real shot of playing. But if that turns for the worse and we have to discuss the Jaguars on Fantasy Football Now, do not forget the name Dearness Johnson, who could give it a go for Jacksonville on Monday night. Aaron Jones, Stephania, the Packers are very banged up in that running back room.
Yeah,
but he's the one that matters the most for fantasy purposes. How healthy or unhealthy is he right now?
I just don't think we're going to see Aaron Jones this week. This is the MCL sprain on his left knee, and it's the whole picture, right? Because he had this hamstring injury that cost him multiple weeks. When he injured his knee, we saw him leave on a cart. He looked devastated. He thought he'd torn his ACL. The fact that it was a more mild injury is terrific news for him, but it doesn't mean you're going to get him back quickly. And we looked back at earlier in the pod, earlier in the week, at the fact that he dealt with MCL injuries before, and he's come back fairly quickly. Well, those have been to his right knee. And it also wasn't in the same knee following, so this one's his left, following a hamstring injury that cost him multiple games. So I think they're going to be careful with him. It just doesn't feel like he's headed back this week.
Yeah, a notoriously conservative team on the medical front as well, which is a good thing, by the way, for the players' well-being. And A.J. Dillon, he sounds like he's going to be good to go. He's been playing through it.
Yeah, he's playing through it. Like, he's not 100%. Yeah. And that's not helping the production. But volume-wise, I think he'll be the guy.
And as we know with A.J. Dillon, you have to temper expectations because he's had a lot of opportunities to fill in as the guy for Aaron Jones. It has not really mounted to much at all for fantasy purposes. Back-to-back games filling in for Jones, under 12 fantasy points for A.J. Dillon. So have you thought at all in the past 9 minutes about what you want to wager with Mike for the game? Do you have anything that you would really desire from Mike?
So the last time Mike and I watched a game together and had a wager going.
Oh, I remember this one.
My quarterback left with a UCL tear.
Yeah, his elbow exploded.
And then became the entire offseason of wondering if Brock Purdy would be back. So I don't know if I trust Mike Clay.
Okay, I don't know.
I'm just
Mike has a pretty nice car. I would consider wagering maybe not just trading cars, but a month of a trade of a car. That seems reasonable.
I like the food wagers.
Okay, food wagers. Okay, yeah, there we go.
Yeah.
But Mike likes yogurt with granola in it.
I know. So that's an easy. I mean, I could
You might win that. Yeah. Hey, Mike, I'll buy you 6 Chobanis and a bag of Bears Valley granola, and you get me, a Chardonnay.
But I'll take a case of nice wine.
There you go. Okay,
Not
a
from
case
Philly.
of nice wine.
You have to go to my hometown and get the wine.
Great stuff, as always, from Stephania Bell. More to come on Thursday Night Football in just a moment here on Fantasy Focus. Are you overwhelmed by insurance? Make it easy. Get all your insurance in one place with Geico. Plus, get 24/7 claim support and on-the-go policy access with the award-winning Geico mobile app. See how easy insurance can be. And go to GEICO. That's right, geico.com. All right, back here on Fantasy Focus, and just before you got on the stage here, Mike, Stephania Bell was trying to make a bet for Sunday afternoon, your Eagles and your 49ers. Have you crafted any ideas of what you want to bet her?
I mean, I like that yogurt.
Well, dude, you have an opportunity to potentially get something legitimate from her.
No, I think that...
Do you have a favorite restaurant locally?
Favorite? I have to think about it. We could find a place.
Like a sushi
bet?
bet?
Is right here. So, like a place in West Hartford or something.
Okay. Something
pick
nice.
a spot. They have some great restaurants.
That West Hartford scene... Hartford has it, / West Hartford also has it. Pretty good food scene there.
I have to think about it a little more.
Okay.
But we'll come up with something. Yeah, I'm ready. I like food, so this should be easy.
All right, Mike. Well, you're going to need some. Hopefully you fueled up on some food prior to this, because we got a packed show ahead here. And we start with a great Thursday night football game.
Yeah,
One of the best of the season, as the Cowboys.
Hold on, flag on the play.
Very appropriate there from Mike. Yes, I know. There were, it felt like about 30 penalties tonight. That's not necessarily an exaggeration. The Cowboys, 41-35 in a game that was far more offensive than we would have imagined. Let's get to the easy stuff first. As Dak Prescott continues his heater, Mike, 28.6 fantasy points. He's got 28-plus points in 5 of his past 6 games.
Unreal.
Quarterback one for a reason this week. He paid off. And CeeDee Lamb, just some ridiculousness for CeeDee Lamb. Check this out. Over the past 6 games, CeeDee Lamb has 7 receiving touchdowns. That number is awesome.
Wow.
How about the target count in those 6 games? You ready for it?
Let's hear it.
14, 16, 14, 9, 9, and 17.
That's unreal.
The Cowboys' strategy right now is pretty straightforward. Get their best players the football, and it's working to an incredible effect right now.
That's like peak DeVonta Adams with Aaron Rodgers sort of usage, maybe above that.
It is.
So,
yeah.
I mean, we're going to rank him. The only reason we don't rank him number 1 every week is because of
Tyreek Hill exists.
That's it.
Yes.
I mean, he is right up there. And what's incredible about it is the first month of the season was not good at all for this offense. So it did not look good. It didn't look good for CeeDee Lamb, but they fixed it.
Yeah.
And he's good to go. I mean, he's the superstar we thought he would be. It took a little time even for his career to get going.
Yep.
I remember, I think it was year 2, you were really hot on his tail that year.
Yeah.
And it didn't,
too early.
he just didn't, wasn't there yet. But you know what you were talking about, because he's the real deal.
He's an unbelievable talent, and the Cowboys have maximized him. I got to give a huge shout out to Mike McCarthy. One of the the coaches that gets the most heat, despite the fact he's a Super Bowl winning head coach, by the way. But there's always this tone surrounding Mike McCarthy that, first of all, us in the media or the fans know more than he does, or that his offenses don't achieve. I get it. They have to win big in the playoffs. I'm not naive to that, people. But Mike McCarthy's done an incredible job as the play caller for the Cowboys. They are better than ever right now with Dak Prescott under center. And I thought about Brandon Cooks, Mike, because I know that you, who's always so calculated with how you project players, probably have a different outlook on Brandon Cooks than some would, right? 4 targets again last night. And yet he turned that into 4 catches for 45 yards and a touchdown. I've decided the category that Brandon Cooks belongs in, because we are in this time of the year. If you're playing somebody and you're the underdog and you have Brandon Cooks available, he's the upside play. Now, he could get you 4 targets that turn into 1 catch for 14 yards and 0 touchdowns, but that's the roll of the dice that you were playing when you have Brandon Cooks in your lineup.
To some extent, but also the last, 6 weeks, he's been pretty good.
Yeah.
He's been producing. The targets have been a little bit up and down, but the offense is playing so well. They're scoring so many touchdowns, and his target share has kind of increased from where it was in the first 6 weeks of the season. So
trending up, yeah.
I feel more comfortable with him as a wide receiver 3 or flex than I have all season long. It was a slow start. He's been good since then.
You held the fort, Mike, on Antonio Pollard. You said he's going to find his way eventually, and he has. You said at some point he's going to have a 5-touchdown and 4-game stretch. So, America,
we're close.
Get ready for this. Next Sunday night, Tony Pollard will score two touchdowns against Mike's Eagles as he has a touchdown in 3 straight games. He had 23 total touches last night. The volume was never the problem. The efficiency still isn't great, Mike, but he keeps scoring touchdowns, and with that kind of volume, he's going to find himself in the top 10 of our running back rankings weekly. And Jake Ferguson scores his 4th touchdown in the past 6 games. Let me say this about Jake Ferguson. Aside from the usage, what a good football player he is.
Yeah.
He's really good, and the Cowboys just continue to nail the draft so well.
Absolutely. He was just a perfect fit. Don't pay Dalton Schultz. Replace him with Jake Ferguson. He was a 4th rounder last year, and it's worked out great. Just a guy we probably didn't give quite enough love to in the offseason because he wasn't a finished product, but they keep doing this at the tight end position in Dallas. So was it Blake Jarwin there for a little while too? They just continue to file guys in. So 5.5 targets per game and 5 touchdowns in 12 games. If you can get that out of a back end tight end one, you're happy with it.
By the way, 4th and 5th round picks last year for the Cowboys included Jake Ferguson and DeRon Bland, who I know was toasted like a piece of toast last night. But he had a pick later to make up for it.
The best corners in the NFL will have games like that. It's fine.
They will. I need to apologize to America. I was down on Geno Smith going into the game yesterday. I was like, I wouldn't start Geno Smith. Can you start a guy who had under 7.5 fantasy points in 2 of his past 4 games?
Nope.
Well, apparently so, because he had nearly 30 fantasy points last night. Is this a sign of things to come, in your opinion, Mike?
I don't think so. He has 3 games with 20-plus points this year, and they're all scattered out. It's not like 3 of his last 4 and he's back. It was like a week 4 and week 11 and now week 13. So I guess he has had a couple in the last month, but not enough for me to dive in. He hasn't reached 16 in any other game this year. He's averaging right around 10 fantasy points per game, and his next 2 opponents, one is good, one is bad. One's the 49ers, that's next, and then it's the Eagles. That's the game that was flexed to Monday Night Football. Maybe that one we like him as a streamer.
Yep.
Certainly we like Brock Purdy this week against Philly, but we're not starting him next week against the Niners.
Part of the reason why he was so good last night is Thielen Metcalf had a monster game. We had this conversation yesterday. Tyler Fulgham filled in, of course, your best friend, Tyler, and we just we boiled this down to a very reductive thought. If you have DK Metcalf, and I said I hate giving this analysis because it's so simple, but you just play the guy, right? Because if DK goes off and you instead played, I use Zay Jones as the example, you would feel sick to your stomach for a month as opposed to playing Zay Jones and him having a reasonable game and DK having a quiet night.
Yeah, and Metcalf may be a little down at times this year, but if you look close at his snaps and targets and even his fantasy output, you're like, he's been fine. It's not like he's yet to get to that point where he's like a top 5 receiver every week. Yeah. But he's just been like a good wide receiver too every week. He either scores a touchdown or has 70 yards. I know I used that stat like 6 to 8 weeks into the season. Yeah. And then this is the upside that he gives you. When he caught that pass and then just like he didn't just coast to the end zone. He ran as fast as he could. And at that size to be running that fast, you're just like, man, this guy is on another planet.
As a matter of fact, per Next Gen Stats, that was the fastest ball carry this entire season.
Really? I was wondering about that.
22.23 miles per hour.
That was his goal? Do you think that's
Probably
what he's thinking about? I'm going to hit that.
Yeah. Pulse, you have something you want to add on that one?
Yeah, so I'm going to guillotine league. We're down to 8 teams, and I benched DK Metcalf last
night.
Oh,
my God. Well, you probably have, who are your other receivers?
It's Amon-Ra St. Brown. I'm starting Christian Kirk or Deontay Johnson, so it was a tough call between the 3 of them.
All right, fair enough.
Well, the Cowboys, but
something, Pulse, if you're out of that guillotine league next week, we now know why.
Yep.
By the way, Pulse and I are playing each other in our Fantasy Focus Show League, and I woke up this morning, and I certainly checked my scores during the game, but I was going through them, just taking a full pulse of them, and I was like, wait, I thought DK had over 37. How do I have only 34 points? I started the Cowboys defense and they had -3.
Brutal.
That Cowboys defense might be an interesting conversation in the next few weeks when they play very good offenses because there are some pretty gnarly splits for them when they play actual offenses versus pumpkins like the Patriots and the Giants.
We talk about this every Sunday when we do defenses on FF Now. I am very aggressive with ranking defenses, very matchup oriented. It's a mix of both, almost 50-50. So, or maybe more. Maybe it's more about the matchup, right?
Yeah.
It's the nature of the beast. I think that's the way you got to do it. Just look at how we picked on the Giants and Jets and all these teams, and it works out almost every time.
Keep your eyes on Zach Charbonnet. He got hurt very, very late in the game. He ended up having a good night. He had a good night prior to that, I should say, though. Yeah. He found the end zone, 19 carries for 60 yards, so bad efficiency. But he had a catch for 39 yards as well, so good for 16.9 fantasy points.
First career touchdown, and his opportunities, so carries plus targets in his 3 games. Walker went down early in that one game, so it's really been 3 games as the lead back, 21, 18, and 21. So if Walker misses another game and Charbonnet's okay, he's certainly going to be a guy you're starting.
DJ Dallas will be a popular name on waivers early in the week unless Pete Carroll comes out and tells us that he is going to be fine, meaning Zach Charbonnet. Or Kenneth Walker III, but both of those guys currently on the mend. DJ Dallas had just 1 total opportunity last night. Big win for the Cowboys. They are 9-3. Dak Prescott squarely in the mix for the NFL's MVP. Coming up next, we preview the massive 49ers-Eagles showdown. Stay tuned here on Fantasy Focus. All right, back here now on Fantasy Focus. Mike Clay, Field Yates, Kevin Pulse for hanging out with you to get you ready for Week 13. 49ers, Eagles, maybe the game of the week in real life, maybe the game of the week in fantasy purposes, for fantasy purposes as well, Mike.
I would say one of the most anticipated of the season, honestly, with all.
Yeah, you think these two teams like each other? No. These two teams, it's very personal between these two teams. The Eagles feel like they are disrespected because the 49ers think that they would have won that game if Brock Purdy had stayed healthy in the NFC Championship game last year. I think both teams share very little love for the other. Makes this game very exciting on Sunday.
Playoff vibes this
Quick
week.
Question for you, Mike, before we get into this any further. I grew up in Massachusetts, so I was used to this with the Patriots growing up. The Eagles will never play a 1 o'clock game ever again, will they?
Not anytime soon.
You mentioned the flex, Monday Night Flex, but it's like this is. I remember growing up. I'm like, what time are the Pats on? I knew Pats like 8:20 Sunday night. Monday Night Football. Oh, Thursday Night Football. Every single game was not at 1 p.m.
Look, as long as Howie's a GM, they're going to have a good roster every year. It's unreal.
Jalen Hurts pretty decent.
They just continue to good call.
So you may have you tipped your hand a little bit here earlier in saying that you can play Brock Purdy, but you feel pretty good about him against the Eagles.
I do, yeah. I mean, I know he had a dud last week, but if you look at the 2 games before that, coming off the bye, 23 and 26 points. Now it's 5 games with 20+ points this year. And look, the Eagles are not a bad defense against the pass. I mean, we know they're elite against the run. They're not bad against the pass. And look, you look at their efficiency, like yards per target, all those kind of things.
All fine, right?
It's like good, actually. It's in the better, best, top 10 in the league.
Okay.
The problem is they have 1 loss. No one has 2 losses. The next best team is 3. I mean, they're winning all the time for the most part.
But they're a bad first half team.
Yeah, but
so they're not like they're
but teams are still throwing on them. But you can't run on them on top of that. So there's a couple things. They're ahead often, and you can't run on them. So teams just attack them through the air, and that's going to be what the Niners are going to do.
You think so, even with Christian McCaffrey?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
I like, I actually like the under on his carry. So that's one of my,
What's his,
the betting playbook.
What is the number?
17.5.
Ooh,
Only one running back has gotten 18 against him this year. So that's
Who was that?
That was, I am totally drawing a blank. Who is it?
Okay.
I can't forget. I'll have to check. But anyway, Pacheco, Isaiah Pacheco. But anyway, second most fantasy points and 23 passing touchdowns, second most to quarterbacks this season. So it's a good spot for Purdy. He's just going to be throwing more than usual. They are favorited, yes, but it should be a competitive game.
He's quarterback 4 for you, quarterback 6 for me. So, of course, I have my confidence here in Brock Purdy. Quarterbacks that are unavailable this week include, of course, Lamar Jackson. It doesn't really matter about something like Aiden O'Connell is not available this week.
Darn.
Sorry. Who else am I missing here? Josh Allen, obviously not available this week.
Oh, yeah.
That's a significant one. Obviously no Joe Burrow because of injury. Who am I forgetting? There are a couple others as well. But the point is that quarterbacks are compromised this week because of those 6 teams that are by. No Tommy DeVito right now this week, which obviously the way he's played recently makes things more complicated. No Justin Fields, no Josh Dobbs.
When it comes to defense, like we like to stream against the Giants. We can't do that this week.
Yes.
So I've been leaning on that on FF now every week.
All right, let's talk about the 2 receivers here. And as everybody who listens to the show knows, we just call them 49ers, right? They're a Niners. So, of course, you just play them. However, we are always looking for someone to crack the code of how things work. When do these 2 players hit at the same time? And Kevin Pulsifer may have cracked the code, he thinks. Yes?
Not sure I've cracked the code, but here's just a little bit more background on that.
Okay.
20-point games from Deebo, Aiyuk, and Kittle this year. Deebo did it in weeks 2, 3, and 12. Ayuk did it in weeks 1, 4, and 11.
Okay.
And Kittle did it in weeks 5, 8, 10, and 11.
So only one game
where
which they've
multiple of them had 20 points.
That was week 11, you said?
Yep.
And Deebo,
all but
of
2
course.
games, if somebody has gone for 20, and the 2 games where nobody did, Deebo was out, and the offense kind of sputtered as a whole. I would lean towards Ayuk. I think more of the downfield speed guys. We saw Gabe Davis and Justin Watson both get a ton of targets and a lot of yards last couple of weeks against the Eagles. So I would lean towards Ayuk, but I mean, you can't count out Deebo from breaking one long.
Yeah, I was going to say I think this is a week where it could be both because of the reasons I just laid out, which is this matchup. The Eagles have allowed the most touchdowns and fantasy points to receivers this season. 27.2 wide receiver targets per game is what they faced this season. That is easily highest in the NFL. Think about it, 27 targets, just a wide receiver. So that's an easy for both guys to get to 10. They only throw to 2 receivers for the most part, maybe a couple for Juwan Jennings, but it should be those 2. And in the 11 games, 17 receivers have gotten to 16 fantasy points. That includes 5 sets of teammates.
Wow.
As well. So
it has worked out.
If there's a week where both of them are going to get there, this would be the one.
All right. So Pulse makes the case for potentially a big Aiyuk week. You make the case for potentially a big Deebo week, maybe both big weeks.
Mm-hmm.
Congratulations to Willie Snead, finishing the top 10 wide receiver this week for the 49ers. Right, Ray McLeod. I guess Willie would have to be promoted from the practice squad first.
Juwan Jennings absolutely scored a touchdown.
Third and Juwan. He's a good player. He's going to find himself some money in free agency. Yeah, the 49ers always have like good depth pieces that end up being really good players, not just for them, but for somebody else once they get a bigger role. Let's go to DeVonta Smith, and he is back right now, Mike. He's been awesome for the past month. A.J. Brown has been incredible all season, but remember, he had that 6-game stretch with 125 or more receiving yards in every game. He has been quiet with under 75 yards in 3 straight games. How do you assess these 2 wide receivers and what we can't quite, what is not a great matchup, but because teams are often trailing against San Francisco, they've thrown the ball a ton, so it looks like an okay matchup.
Yeah, it's fine. 10th most fantasy points to receivers. So again, same thing. Teams have to throw against them. Their secondary has Jervarius Ward, who's awesome, but behind him at corner, definitely not great. I mean, they've made some moves, and I think it's been a little bit better, but still an area where you can attack. My level of concern with A.J. Brown is 0. Also, you mentioned the down game he had against the Chiefs. He was shadowed by L'Jarius Sneed. Last week, not a great game, but still scored a touchdown at 14.5 fantasy points and 9 targets, right? Like, he's fine. So not worried about A.J. Brown at all. DeVonta Smith, you look at his last 4 games, a touchdown, a touchdown, 99 yards, a touchdown, 99 yards, 106 and a touchdown. Like, yeah, you're right. He's been back the last 4 games, 14+ fantasy points in all of those games. Is this the highest we've had him ranked in
probably
a long time since the early part of the season? Yeah, I think it's safe to say he's back in the wide receiver 2 mix, and we're playing him in this one.
He has now played 7 games without Dallas Goedert over the past, call it, season and 2/3, because of course we're now 2/3 of the way through this season. He has 8 targets in every single one of those games. Does DeVonta Smith? Goddard has not practiced so far this week. Seems like a long shot to play on Sunday. Do you want Zach Ertz back in Philadelphia?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. I tweeted about that before the trade deadline.
Did, back in October.
That it would kind of make sense.
Did I make that? Did I also make an option? Like, I feel like I said at one point, like, are we sure that Zach Ertz isn't like released at some point down the stretch just to go?
I didn't catch that, but that makes sense. Yeah.
No, I'm probably just trying to steal your shine
did you think
right
about
now.
That while driving into the pod?
Yes, that's what it was.
Things we think about,
yes,
sure.
exactly.
Yeah,
so,
it makes perfect sense, especially with Goddard hurt. But even if even when Goddard's back, just having that presence of Zach Ertz is a 2.
Yeah.
I mean, look, they don't really. You're seeing it now. Last week, 25% of their plays had 4 receivers on the field because they didn't want to put Jack Stoll out there or Alberto or whoever. So they definitely have a need there in terms of tight end depth.
Okay, last thought here on Zach Ertz before we move to DeAndre Swift here. So when Zach Ertz was traded to Arizona, the idea was that Philadelphia was doing him a favor, right? Like, give him a chance to go and compete once again for a championship, play for a team that was a true blue contender. Given the fact that the Eagles are the best team in the NFL and the Cardinals might be they're the second worst team in terms of record right now, and they're a very, very, very bad team right now. Doesn't it feel like that must have been like 5 years ago?
Yeah, it really does.
It was 2 years ago.
That's unreal. Yeah, the league changes so fast.
It's so fast. So I'm saying that for all my friends out there that root for the Cardinals or the Panthers or the Patriots or the Giants right now.
Absolutely.
Hope it's just around the corner.
Look at
you
Houston.
just have to hit the picks. Yeah.
Look at Houston.
Honestly, yeah.
They can beat anybody right now.
You need to get a top 2 pick this year.
Yeah.
You need to get a top 3 pick. You need one of those 2 quarterbacks, guys. You need Drake May or Kay Williams. I'm just telling you that right now. I'm saying that quietly because I know that it's hard for fans whose teams are losing right now to take the losses every single week, but you need them. You need them. Let's talk about DeAndre Swift here, Mike, because the 49ers have allowed the 5th fewest fantasy points to opposing running backs. But is this a game in which that number might be a little bit deceiving for this reason? Part of the reason why San Francisco is allowing so few fantasy points to running backs is they are often bludgeoning opponents. You can't run because you pass. That's why we just talked about the passing metrics against that secondary in San Francisco. Could DeAndre Swift be just fine this week?
I did move him down. I use RB16.
Okay.
Part of that is a lack of involvement in the passing game.
Yep.
As of late, 3 or fewer targets in 5 consecutive games. That is a concern. But he does have 15+ touches in every game since week 1. He didn't play much in week 1. Since week 2 kicked off, 15+ in every game, averaging 19-point games. So you're still starting him, but I don't actually, I guess I'm 14th after I pulled out Thursday Night Football, guys. But nonetheless, he should be in lineups. But I will say this about this game. they're like, when I write the playbook, I fill out the lineup blocks, and then I'm like, I'm going to write about a borderline guy, right? Or a storyline. With this game, it was probably the hardest all year to come up with a topic that's of interest, because everyone is a lineup block, both quarterbacks, the top 2 running backs, and no other running backs. All the rest, that would be the only one. I don't really write them up, but yeah, no tight ends for Philly.
Obviously,
George
either
Kittle.
defense.
Are you benching? Yeah. I would not start either one. Yeah.
There you have it. Any thoughts on Jake Moody and Jake Elliott? Play them.
I would say, yeah. Elliott, yes. Moody's close. Borderline. Yeah.
Moody could get there one day, but Elliott, what a legend that guy is. 59-yard boom
good.
Last week
what
to help
find.
Philly to the win. All right, coming up in just a minute, we'll talk about Zack Moss and the new Indianapolis backfield. All right, back here on Fantasy Focus, Field Yates, Mike Clay, Kevin Pulsifer previewing Week 13. Huge week on tap, the second to last week of the fantasy football regular season. We had this conversation earlier on in the week. We don't need to redo the entirety of it, Mike. We both have Zack Moss now inside our top 8 with Thursday night players removed for running backs. What are your expectations for the guy that earlier this year was Jonathan Taylor-like?
Yeah, it's just easy to look back. It's nice that we have this sample of a month, weeks 2 to 5, where Taylor was out or limited, and the volume was massive. 24.5 targets, 129 yards, and 21.4 fantasy points per game. Had 4 touchdowns in those 4 games. He was playing really well. I mean, almost 5 yards per carry. This is a guy that actually has run the ball really well the last 3 seasons. The sample size wasn't huge, but especially starting late last season, he was really effective. They're giving him the volume. He's playing at a high level. He was delivering as a mid-range RB1. I don't see any reason to be concerned here. And by the way, the best game of his entire career came earlier this season against this Titans defense. And I know they've been decent against running backs overall this season, but over the last few weeks, Chuba Hubbard and Rachaad White both had huge games against him, 20-plus points. So as far as I'm concerned, it's right back to where we were the first month of the season. Zack Moss is a certified lineup lock in RB1.
I've got a league in which I have Josh Allen as my starting quarterback. It's a 6-point passing touchdown league, and it has significant bonuses for various yardage markers that Josh Allen is extremely well equipped to hit. Him being on a bye this week had my team feeling a little bit sad. I had Zack Moss on my bench. Talk about a little punch to add to your lineup out of nowhere earlier on in the week. And by the way, and I'm going to curse them right now, but the Colts offense is so saturated this year. It's the running game, and then it's the 2 wide receivers.
That's correct.
For a team that has really reasonable depth at tight end, they hardly use those guys. Kylie Granson, Mo Alley Cox. It's just like, no one has a big day out of those guys, in part because the 2 receivers they have continue to be awesome. Correct, that, of course, is Michael Pittman Jr., who has just 2 touchdowns this year, but feels like he is due. And Josh Downs, who both Mike and I have as wide receiver 27, and Kevin Pulsifer has something on Josh Downs.
So he's played 5 healthy games with Gardner Minshew at quarterback, and he's averaging 9.6 targets per game in those games. 14.8 fantasy points per game.
Yeah. Poor Alec Pierce. He's just MVS now.
And
he just runs, stays on the perimeter. He plays like the most snaps every week of the receivers. You just don't throw to him.
You can ignore the box scores. The last couple of games he was hurt. He got under 25% of the snaps, only 1 in 3 targets. So don't look past that. He's done well against Cleveland. He's done well against Baltimore. He's done well against the Saints.
So Downs had 13 targets last week, but those 2 games Pulse was referencing were before that. That was one. He got hurt after 1 catch for 10 yards, and then he played against the Patriots in Germany, 2 catches for, I think, 30 yards, but he's at under 25% of the snaps. Really good find, really good player, and most of the targets in the passing game are going to those 2 receivers specifically.
Yeah, and the Titans you would think the opposite, right? They're struggling. They're losing a lot. You would think they would be receivers one haven't much volume against them. They've had the 6th most fantasy points to receivers. They've had all kinds of issues, whether it's been injury or performance in that secondary. So it's a good matchup as well.
Colts, impressive team. Very impressive. Yeah. Very impressive work by Shane Steichen so far this season.
Like that.
Seems like they know what they're doing over there in Philadelphia with that coaching staff, which, of course, Shane Steichen was previously on. The Dolphins, we think, are going to have Devon Achene back this weekend, Mike. Of course, Achene came back from IR, then gets banged up again, missed Black Friday game, should play on Sunday against the Commanders. That means that he and Raheem Mostert and Jeff Wilson Jr. will all be available. So just sort of rank those 3, and maybe along with those rankings, how much confidence you have in starting them.
What's funny is I think we agree Achene, a little risk. We had the setback in the 3rd snap last game. But we all, if you have him on your team and he's active, like what we saw earlier this year, how do you bench him?
You don't.
And what's funny about that is he has 1 career game with more than 12 touches. And when he's already anointed, right? So we don't know for sure what this guy's going to be going forward. The knock on him was that he was a bit undersized. And obviously he's dealt with durability issues here, and they have other backs to use. But yeah, I mean, I have him ranked 18th. If I have him on my roster, I'm going to start him. Raheem Mostert, I don't know if I would necessarily. I'm really nervous about it. I know he's had a lot of volume the last 2 weeks, but Achene was out, and Jeff Wilson was inactive for one of them games, and Savon Ahmed got hurt in one of those games. So I'm not buying too into that. Not seeing much volume in the passing game, too, which is a killer. 4 targets in his last 5 games. So I would say Achene, locking him in. Mostert, flex option. 6 teams are on a bye. It helps his cause a little bit. Jeff Wilson Jr., fine for your bench, but not a guy that I'm necessarily starting.
Yeah, Achene number 19 and 18 for us in terms of running back ranks, respectively. 23 for me for Raheem Mostert, 25 for Mike on Mostert, and then Wilson hovering around RB 48 in our consensus ranks. Mostert does make me nervous as well. He's been so good this year, and he feels like, the best value in fantasy football, right there in the conversation that, like, I shouldn't be disappointed if he has a quiet game on Sunday because he's just been unbelievable. But I'm still a little nervous.
It's touchdown or bust.
Yeah.
If Achene's healthy, it's touchdown or bust. Does he score 1, maybe 2 touchdowns? He has that in him, which is more than a lot of other running backs can say, but there's a real chance he has 9 carries, 1 target, and doesn't score, and you're just going to be really upset with yourself.
Off the cuff question here. Could this be a Terry McLaurin Sunday?
Against Miami? I mean, if they're trailing, we know. I mean, Washington chucks the ball around, first and pass attempts and completions, up there in yards.
Passing yards first, yeah.
But then again, that's been the case all year long, and he's been all over the map. So, I mean, really good perimeter corners, obviously, Ramsey and Howard. So
I'm just trying to make it happen. Honestly, I don't have that much. I have McLaurin and only the Scott Fish Bowl where we're in the playoffs now, so it's like I don't have a ton of investment in him, but I'm just trying to make it happen.
Yeah, can we get like a couple big plays from Terry McLaurin instead of Brian Robinson in the passing game?
No, I'll take that. I'll take Brian Robinson. Don't worry, I'll take that part.
Yeah,
I have no issue with Brian Robinson.
I mean, they're kind of spreading it around to a lot of guys. Curtis Samuel had his most targets last week than he's had in since 2009.
9 catches, 100 yards for Curtis Samuel. So they're
2019. There it is.
Yeah, unbelievable. So there's one receiver out of Terry McLaurin, Jahan Dotson, and Curtis Samuel that has yet to reach 100 yards in a game this season. It's Terry McLaurin, of course.
Of course.
Monday Night Football on our airwaves. Trevor Lawrence and the Jaguars play Jake Browning, and the Bengals has a little bit less sizzle than it would if Joe Burrow were still healthy, but not going to stop us from watching this game on Sunday. Let's talk about Trevor Lawrence here, Mike, and it's specific to this week, but also specific to going forward. I keep asking you, like, when you have a player with this much natural talent, one game can prove to be the trigger that, like, unlocks the player's potential going forward. Have you reached that point with Trevor Lawrence after back-to-back monster games?
Not yet. I want to see it through the air. Okay. The last 2 games, he has 3 rushing touchdowns, only 17 yards. So that tells me it's a little bit fluky. I need more consistent production passing through the air. 12 passing touchdowns in 11 games. It's not good enough. So, he's had 2 decent games the last few weeks. 2 weeks ago was the number 1 scoring quarterback. This past week was 6th, but his best finish was 8th before that, and his only top 10s were against the Colts. Yeah. So I'm not there yet going forward, but this week, again, 6 teams on a bye, playing Cincinnati, decent defense, enough that it should be competitive. They're 8-point favorites, so maybe not, but I think he should be able to do enough damage to be a starting option this week, which is why we have him QB7, but I'm not sure yet that he's a guy we're going to feel good about his upside going forward. We just haven't seen it enough this year. Yeah,
crazy enough for Trevor Lawrence. Over the past 2 weeks, he has just 17 rushing yards, except he has 9.85 points per game on the ground because he has 3 rushing touchdowns over the past 2 games. So 3 rushing touchdowns on a total of 7 carries. That, I think, is part of the reason why, if you're not totally convinced, it's just the idea that consistency in the passing game, in the running game, is not going to prevail week after week after week, especially if Travis Etienne is good to go on Monday night.
By the way, you've spent a lot of time watching, tape now of college prospects. What's your eye test telling you on Jake Browning after a game?
Where you I'm concerned.
Yeah.
Concerned. I mean, just like the overall wellness of that offense. I think it was yesterday we had this conversation with Tyler, so I apologize if it sounds redundant to some. But yeah, like everybody, I don't do the projections, obviously, but if the Bengals are averaging like 2.75 touchdowns per game, probably more than that with Joe Burrow, 3.
I think it was lower this year, but it started to pick up as they had the slow start.
We're talking a full touchdown discount. Like the fact that 2 of Jamar Chase's catches last week out of 4 came on tipped passes, I'm very concerned.
Yeah.
Very,
that
very
makes
concerned.
you concerning for the other guys. Like, we're not starting Tyler Boyd, and T. Higgins is borderline. I don't know.
He was 31 this week.
What's that?
I have his wide receiver.
Yeah, that's
31.
around where I have him as well. Chase, you have to start, but Mixon and Chase, you're starting, and that's it. I'm with you.
Higgins has 2 or fewer catches in 4 of his 7 games played this season. So even taking away Jake Browning and the health, even prior to that, he had been very boom bust.
49ers vibes from Higgins
yes,
going
he
forward,
is
where
giving
you
us
can't
that.
bench him. But yeah.
Free agent this offseason. I wonder if he wishes his season were going better, given the fact that he is just, 5 months away from being on the open market. 4 months away, actually, to be more specific. So Zay Jones is going to be active on Monday night. So Calvin Ridley, wide receiver 1, right?
Obviously.
Yeah.
We're starting him. I feel better about him than Kirk right now, honestly.
Yeah.
No, Ridley's been out playing him, and Kirk's targets have been down when Zay Jones has played. That's another trend that goes along with Ridley playing better.
Yeah, I mean, and also like with Kirk, it's kind of it is what it is, right? Like you kind of know, like it's not a huge ceiling, right? I mean, like he'll have the occasional 100-yard plus touchdown game, but more often than not with Christian Kirk, it's like 5 to 7 targets for 50 to 70 receiving yards. All right, more thoughts, including the new look Pittsburgh Steelers offense. We roll along here on Fantasy Focus. Field Yates and Mike Clay. All right, back here on Fantasy Focus, Week 13 preview. Field Yates, Mike Clay, Kevin Paulson for hanging out with you to get you set for Week 13. And let's talk about that Steelers offense they had over 400 yards in a game last week. What? Wait, they actually got utilization out of Pat Freiermuth, a second-round pick just a few years ago, who had more receiving yards than any player in the entire NFL last week. Weird what happens when you actually let your guys cook.
When was their last 400-yard game?
It had been 2018, December of 2018. So almost 5 years since they had 400 total yards in a game, or at least, you know what, let me rephrase that. It had been almost 5 years since they had 421, which is what they had last week. So there might have been a couple 400-yard games, but not 421-yard games over the past 5 years. But Mike, I thought that like the Pat Freiermuth utilization last week, I thought was concerted. Like I thought it was a concerted effort to play to the strengths of the quarterback a little bit more, which is not exactly like just exclusively targeting the perimeter. If anybody here looked at Kenny Pickett's passing chart via Next Gen Stats after the game last Sunday, it looked like the entirely different thing than what he had been for the full season, kind of spraying the ball around the yard as opposed to just like deep to Deontay Johnson on one side or deep to George Pickens on the other side here. Do you agree with the idea that Pat Freiermuth's usage was intentional and it might be like not sustainable to the tune of 9 catches for 120 yards, but to tight end 1 utilization?
Yeah, I was going to say somewhere in between where he's, I would say probably back to where he was last year is what we should expect going forward. So, yeah, I think it was intentional. They came out quick, right? It wasn't like this was scattered throughout. I mean, eventually it was, but they came out firing early on and got him the ball. He got off to a really hot start in this game. But you're right. Career highs in catches and yards, so you expect him to come back to earth. But here's the thing. He had 9 for 120 in this game. His first 5 games this year, 9 for 60.
Yeah, crazy.
So just
9 for 120. So the same number of catches and twice as many yards in one game.
In one game. Yeah.
Granted, he had been on IR and missed some time. That is a wild stat, though, for Pat Freiermuth.
He was tight end 7 last year in fantasy points and only had 2 touchdowns. Yeah. So if they really get him
like
going,
80 catches last year, right?
Yeah. If they get the targets going here consistently and he scores, you would expect touchdowns to regress to the mean a little bit, be a little bit better. This is a guy that certainly can be a mid-range tight end 1 going forward.
If I forget to ask you guys about a regression candidate in about 45 seconds, once we finish with the Steelers wide receivers, please remind me. But the Steelers wide receivers are in a great spot this weekend, Mike.
Oh, yeah. Arizona, 3rd most fantasy points to the perimeter. Yep. And that's where the big 2 here in Pittsburgh play primarily. Johnson's 80%. I believe Pickens is 87%. So they're both outside. Arizona, all kinds of issues at corner. Antonio Hamilton, who's fine, serviceable NFL corner, not a 1. He was out last week. Marco Wilson has been their number 1 all year. He was benched last week. So they have all kinds of issues. Yeah, so they're already struggling. And now you have the injury. You have the guy getting benched. They're trying to figure this out. And they're trying some young guys out, which makes sense. But this is a spot where it's ripe for the picking for the Steelers passing game.
We like every Steeler this week, other than maybe Kenny Pickett because he hasn't proven himself to have a high ceiling as a fantasy quarterback. But we like the 2 wide receivers, Pat Freiermuth, and the 2 running backs. That's 5 startable Steelers given the matchup against Arizona.
Yeah, I mean, I've Johnson ranked as a starter for sure. Pickens closer to 40. But I mean, if this is the week to use him, if you're going to fire him up as a flex,
pressed to use a player, this would be the week to use George Pickens. And last week, George Pickens, Deontay Johnson, and Pat Freiermuth combined for 73% of the targets for Pittsburgh. So, like, they're throwing it at least to the right guys. That part was a step forward under this new offensive coordinator arrangement. Yeah. All right, regression candidate time. I've said this before, but I'll mention it again because we are now getting closer and closer to it. Evan Ingram, still no touchdown catches this season. Will he catch a touchdown pass this year?
This year?
This year.
Yes.
He will.
Yeah. I mean, I mentioned it. The part of the reason is bad luck, obviously, but they're averaging just basically one passing touchdown per game this season.
Yeah.
So they haven't really gone him. But yeah, it's fluky. Yeah.
How many catches so far for Impulse? Do you know? Let's look at Evan Ingram's total number of catches this season.
And he, by the way, he's never really been good in this department. I believe his career high was as a rookie when, remember, there were injuries.
Like 10?
When's the last time the Giants had good receivers? Like Plaxico Burress era? Like it's been Hakeem Nicks, like Mario Manningham. They had good depth. But that year they had, everyone was hurt. There was that game in Denver where he was their number one receiver.
Yep.
He had a bunch of touchdowns that year. Since then, he hasn't been great in that category.
What do we got?
64 catches this year, no touchdowns.
That's 11 games?
Though, it's a little bit of luck, but he also saw his first end zone target of the season last week.
Okay, so 11 games played so far. 64 divided by 11 is just under 6.
5.8.
5.8. Do that math times 17. That gets us to about 100 catches this season. Deontay Johnson was at 85 last year. That was the most catches ever without a touchdown reception. Evan Ingram might be breaking history.
They're going to get him one.
What would you do if you're Deontay Johnson and Evan Ingram breaks your record 1 year later? Like, would you send him?
Is that prestigious award? I don't know.
No, I'd be like, dude, thank you. Like, I will buy you a Benz for doing that.
A Benz?
I don't know. Deontay makes $19 million a year. You can probably afford a Benz for.
Fair enough.
I don't know. It's not like us. We're just fantasy football analysts.
I mean, you were talking
Professional
about my
wide
car
receivers.
before. I'll take a Benz.
I drive a Jeep. I have a very mundane car. I'm not one to talk about cars very much. Let's talk about the Saints wide receivers and maybe even the tight ends more specifically.
Yeah.
Could it be that Juwan Johnson and Taysom Hill go off this weekend?
I think Johnson is a good streamer. Again, 6 teams on a bye. We have some injuries to position. We're still keeping an eye on a guy like Trey McBride, who we don't know if he's going to go. So there's a couple question marks. Johnson is out there on waivers in a lot of leagues. And if you're in that situation where you have someone like McBride, you scoop up Juwan Johnson and give yourself a chance at least this week. Last week, a season-high 7 targets and 45 yards. The touchdowns haven't been there, but he also is out for a big span of the season with injuries, healthy now. And there was a lot of Juwan Johnson hype in the offseason that, like, the connection with Derek Carr was great and he was going to have a career year. And I know sometimes that's coach speak, but, you know, I reached out to some people that cover the team and to check in on that. And they were like, no, it's real. So maybe he gets going. Maybe this guy gets on a heater and is tight end 7 the rest of the season. I think it's possible for a couple of reasons to what I just laid out, but also, like you said, the injuries here. I mean, they certainly are going to be without 2 of their top 3 receivers in this game.
Yep.
And Chris Olave, we'll see. He's at practice, but he's iffy for sure. But I do expect the switch to be more targets to the tight ends, whether it's Taysom Hill, and certainly I think Juwan Johnson will be featured regardless this week.
There may be another niche Twitter account in the makings here. Coach Speak Index, which if you don't follow it already, you should be. It's very useful. It's actually incredibly well researched by Greg, who runs the account, and like helps you, like it legitimately informs you of decisions based off of how coaches are addressing players or answering questions, you name it. There might be a second niche here of just tracking all the stuff said during the offseason and then how it actually pans out during the season ahead. Because you're right. I mean, the Juwan Johnson buzz was legit, and the team signed her to this 2-year, $13 million extension as a restricted free agent. You were like, whoa. And he's been fine.
Yeah, but again, he missed a huge chunk of the season.
Totally,
like, how healthy has he been? He got hurt like immediately, disappeared for the
I'm just saying,
6 weeks or so.
Yeah.
So I hear you. But again, if he's healthy now, wouldn't surprise me if he got rolling the rest of the season.
I've got him as tight end 11. I have Taysom Hill as tight end 8 because you know Hill's going to get some sort of funky utilization this week.
Yeah, remember, he didn't get, he's kind of flown under the radar the last couple of weeks, but 81 yards last week.
Yeah.
Like 9 touches again. He's
of course,
averaged 7.5 a game. He's doing his thing.
Rashee Rice had his breakout game last week, Mike. He had 8 catches, 10 targets, 107 yards, and a touchdown. Does that mean because of one good game, we automatically trust Rashee Rice for the Chiefs?
When's the last time you trusted a Chiefs receiver? Like when Tyreek Hill was there?
Yeah, Tyreek Hill.
Yeah, no, I don't trust him, but would I start him with 6 teams out? I keep using that, but that's the case this week. He's 33rd on he was 33rd going into Thursday Night Football. So I would start him. Part of it too is because last week we did see a little bit of a boost forward in playing time, his second highest snap share, but more importantly, when he was on the field, they were featuring him. They were trying to get him the ball, career high in targets, catches, and yards last week. Also, he has exactly 1 touchdown in 3 of his last 5 games. So he's still, in a good offense. You have opportunities to find the end zone, and that has been the case. So, I think he's a wide receiver 3, or we'll say a borderline wide receiver 3, but trust is it's something that used to be said on this pod a lot. Trust is
a strong word. I've got him as wide receiver 28. I got a feeling here, a good feeling here on Rashee Rice. This is kind of a fun stat or a sad stat, depending on which part of it you're looking at. But Rashee Rice is 9th in the NFL in yards per route run. 2.62. That's good. Good company,
That's
right?
great.
The likes of Tyreek Hill, Brandon Ayuk, Justin Jefferson, A.J. Brown, Nico Collins, CeeDee Lamb, Keenan Allen, Monroe St. Brown. Poor Marquez Valdez-Scantling.
Oh, no.
0.87 yards per route run.
I bet you Alec Pierce is down there. You got guys like that, yeah.
These are the
lot of
like,
snaps,
what do they call them?
targets.
Like the cardio kids, right? They just run up and back and up and back and hopefully create space for other players within the offense. Same game, Mike. Do you think Jordan Love is streamable?
I have him QB 12 going into Thursday night, so I probably not. The Chiefs are winning a lot because of their defense this year. They've been terrific on that side of the ball. 8th fewest fantasy points to quarterbacks. They still lead off, then you have to throw against them, so it's not like they're 3rd fewest. He's passable as a streaming option, but again, he has not had a lot of good games. He spiked a little bit to start the season. He was QB 5 last week, but 9th. Keep this in mind. 5th last week, 9th or lower, 7 straight weeks prior. So 9th was the best for 7 straight weeks. So not necessarily. I'm not really buying it.
I was going to ask you about Jaden Reed, but he does sound very iffy to play.
Yeah.
Back-to-back DNPs during practice for Jaden Reed. He has a chest issue. Assuming he is available, he would be limited, I would think. Can you trust him? I know he said a strong word, but
yeah, because he's been good lately, and they're handing him the football as well.
Yeah,
so
like
he's
that
probably
part.
he could get 5, 6, 7 touches. I think the guy I'm looking at though, and this one is Romeo Doubs.
Ooh.
I think he's maybe the best play of their receivers. Certainly
Explain.
close. Christian Watson's going to, I think, draw L'Jarius Sneed. We talked about that earlier this week. I think Sneed is shadowed in 10 straight. I think we all agree Watson, the top perimeter receiver for the Packers, and they kind of tipped that off on Thanksgiving when they tried to feature him. So I think Sneed will be on him, and that's going to open up the other side of the field, which has been a plus matchup for number 2 receivers, Romeo Doubs, up against Jaylen Watson. So he's a name to watch, and he hasn't been great in terms of volume, but the touchdowns have been there for Doubs here or there. So a good spot for him.
wouldn't it be funny if the Chiefs decided to deploy L'Jarius Sneed on like Dontavian Wicks?
That would be the ultimate insult to Christian Watson.
Oh my God, it'd be so bad.
That's what he needs to get his career going.
The only thing about Christian Watson, though, that's different between him and a lot of the top receivers, that he's like a pure speed guy, right? Which I get it. Like, I guess Tyreek Hill would fall into that same category, but Hill does so much as well. So, you know what? Retract that statement. I expect Christian. I mean, not that I was actually expecting Dontavian Wicks, but I would be surprised now if they don't shadow Christian Watson.
Think if the game I would point to, because a lot of times he is shadowing clear number ones like Devontae Adams, A.J. Brown, guys like that. But the game I would point to is the Chargers, where there was no Mike Williams. Keenan Allen was in the slot, so he doesn't get shadowed by ones. But they shadowed Josh Palmer with him.
Yeah, and he
so
cooked.
that's kind of a tip-off.
He cooked.
Yeah, Palmer actually had a good
8
game.
for 111 yards.
Steve was you know what? Compared to the guys I've been covering, I'm just going to take it easy this week.
Yeah, he was like prep-wise that week. He was like, whatever.
Yeah, this compared to the other guys. Yeah, I mean, there's maybe something to that because like Marshawn Lattimore, how he shows up for Mike Evans and other superstars, and then he gets like toasted against like average competition. So
we see it every week in the NFL, Mike.
Yeah.
The Chargers defense is wretched. And how did they play last week against an awesome Baltimore team? Very good. Yeah. Meanwhile, Baltimore has been guilty of at times playing down to opponents and then playing up to the big boys.
I've been watching the Eagles all year.
The Commanders are their most difficult opponent.
Yeah.
It's crazy. Packers just in general, though, like there's the tricky part is that the matchup in this week just makes it very unclear, like who is the obvious must start at any position. Someone's going to have a good game, but with A.J. Dillon likely starting for Aaron Jones, you don't feel great about that one. Jordan Love, as you just laid out, wide receivers, there's so many of them. Like it's just a tough time to figure out exactly who you should be starting.
Yeah, and by the way, if Jaden Reed's out and Dontavian Wicks returns, he'll play. Malik Heath will be involved. Like they have other guys, and they like to rotate them. They like to spread the ball out. That has been a reason for their success, I think, over the last month as they've improved. It's just spreading it around. Now, there's no Luke Musgraves. That's one guy kind of out the door. They didn't really feature the tight ends last week, but yeah, a lot of guys are going to get their hands on the ball in this game, which again, it hurts your upsides. It's like very Chiefs-like, in that regard. These two teams.
Spread it around. Spread it around.
These two teams playing each other, pick your poison, a wide receiver. Yeah.
All right, Drake London's our last topic here in this block, Mike. He, of course, of the Falcons, plays against the Jets on Sunday. What do you make of the opportunity here for Drake London? I sort of feel like, is there a fantasy matchup that feels on paper more like a punt than this one? A wide receiver who plays in such a run-heavy offense and sporadically is targeted against the stingiest pass defense in the entire NFL.
Yeah, so I'm going to say some bad things here, and then I will give you some reason for hope.
Okay, I'll
Drake
take
London,
it.
okay?
Yep.
So I do have him ranked really low. Certainly, if you can bench bench him. It's fine to do against the Jets. But 5 for 91 last week. Pretty good game for him, but he's had 55 or fewer yards the prior 3 games, only 3 top 25s this year. 1 finished better than 19. That was a 5th all the way back in week 6. So he hasn't had much upside, first of all. 6.5 targets per game, only 2 touchdowns on the season, a lot of negative things. And of course, you're playing the Jets, second fewest fantasy points to receivers, fewest to the perimeter. Here's the reason why there's some sliver of hope if you want to start him this week. The Jets' pass defense has shown some cracks over the last few weeks. We've seen 14-plus points from Tyreek, Khalil Shakir, Jaylen Waddle, Keenan Allen, and DeVonta Adams. Over the last 4 games, all those guys got to 14 points. So you get 14 out of London as your flex. That's not terrible.
Not at all.
Also, a little bit of a switch here from Atlanta. Drake London playing in the slot a lot more over the last couple of weeks, which means you avoid
those 2 excellent perimeter
Sauce Gardner
corners,
and DJ Reed, which is doesn't make for an easy matchup. But Michael Carter's actually been dealing with an injury, so it has been okay in the slot, but it's a better matchup than playing on the perimeter. So I expect them to continue to do that in this game and try to get the ball in his hands.
This is why Mike Clay is unparalleled with his insight, dropping knowledge about Drake London's alignment over the past few weeks. Nobody better. We have Drake London as wide receiver 36 for me, 35 for Mike Clay. Again, one last reminder, Thursday Night Football players already removed and 6 teams on a bye. More fantasy focus in just a moment coming up next. All right, we're back here on Fantasy Focus. Field Yates, Mike Clay, and Kevin Paulson. We're getting you ready for Week 13. And, Mike, you've got your eyes on some ways to help people make some money. What do you got?
Let's go. We got a parlay for this week, Week 13, and we're going to scatter it across a whole bunch of games. So here's what we got. Najee Harris over 12.5 rushing attempts. This one feels like a layup, right, in this great matchup against Arizona. Look, he's been over this in 7 of 11 games, including 7 of his last 9. And guess which team has faced the most running back carries this season at 27.1 per game? It is the Arizona Cardinals. So like that one, we're going Curtis Samuel over 3.5 catches. He has 4+ catches in 7 of 11 games this season. That includes 5 straight in a row, 5 in a row before he had that injury in week 8. He also had 9 catches on 12 targets last week. Washington leads the NFL in pass attempts, so that's a good one as well. And a great matchup against Miami, 3rd most catches allowed to receivers this season. Like that one. And I like Christian McCaffrey. I teased this one earlier in the show, under 17.5 rushing attempts. He's averaging right at 17.5 per game, but he hasn't really been hitting this mark as of late. He's hit it in only 2 of his last 6 games. And of course, check this out. The Eagles are facing 16.7 running back carries per game this season. This number is above what they're facing on average the entire season. This year, only 1 running back has hit 16 carries against the Eagles. That was Isaiah Pacheco earlier this season. So I like this one. I like this 3-part parlay. A reminder, download the ESPN Bet app. Must be 21 or older. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER.
All right, great stuff right there from Mike, as always. Time now for us to wrap up the show in the same way we do every Friday, Mike, which is a look at our starts of the week. I feel like you've kind of already mentioned this one during the week, but let's revisit the Jaylen Warren well.
Yeah, we're going to do this. I just talked up Najee Harris as well, so let's go with the other running back. We like them both this week. Yep. Okay, so I like Jaylen Warren. That is my start of the week going up against Arizona. 16 touches, 62 yards last week. His prior 2 games, he had 100+ scrimmage yards and 2 touchdowns. That was in actually 3 straight games prior to last week. He hasn't gotten to 17 touches per game. We know the ceiling is kind of limited, probably not going to get to 20, but the matchup is just too good here. Arizona, 2nd most yards, touchdowns, and fantasy points to running backs. And how'd they do last week?
Not bad. No, not good. Kyron Williams had like 39 points.
38 fantasy points allowed.
Pretty good.
I think there's room for both of these guys to crush it in this game.
Both could
start of the week. Start them.
All right, my start of the week is Adam Thielen for the Carolina Panthers. And the Panthers, of course, play the Buccaneers, the Bucs, who have been not good against pass at all this season. They have actually been 2nd in terms of yielding receiving yards to opposing wide receivers this season. Meanwhile, their offense is pretty darn good. The Panthers, as we know, play from behind all the time, and people are kind of off the scent a little bit with Adam Thielen this week after 1 catch for 3 yards last week. Well, in the 5 games prior to last week, Adam Thielen had 10 or more targets in 4 of them. The volume's still very, very good for Adam Thielen, even if the touchdown production has tailed off from the beginning of the season, in which he was just carrying lineups. Still too good of an opportunity against a bad secondary and a matchup in which they should be trailing because they're 1-10. They're always trailing.
Yeah,
Always.
I'm with you. And it's easy to, it feels like he's in a slump, but he had a big game 2 weeks ago.
Yeah,
Week 11,
huge.
15 plus fantasy points in that one. By the way, Buccaneers, you mentioned their struggles against the pass. Also, second most fantasy points allowed to the slot. They have a rookie playing in the slot. That's where Thielen is 73% of the time. So I'm with you. This is a good spot for him.
There we go. Mike Clay agrees. Makes you feel even better about it. Last thing here, Mike, before we say goodbye. Did you happen to catch any of Tyler's appearance yesterday?
I sure did. I watched the pod. I watched him on Triple G as well.
Yeah.
I've got a lot of Tyler content over the last couple of days. I don't know if that's good or bad.
Did he do okay? You can be honest. No one's listening.
You know what? He did great.
Wow.
He did great.
That.
Yeah,
Mike Clay.
He did a great job. I mean, look, here's the thing. I texted him after the show and I said, it's mid-December. What is it? We're in December now?
December 1st now, yeah.
December 1st now. I mean, I can get a head start on vacation.
I could use a month off, right?
Take some time.
All right, Tyler. We'll see you next week.
Yeah, if he wants to sit it, I mean, that's okay. No, he's look, I'm just saying nice things so he cooks for me. I
know. I was going to say, I know. We really need to work him into our good graces. He did a great job on that show. I was impressed.
I mean, he went up against people who are like cooking for their career. Like you look at them on social, it's all cooking all day. Like he's a full-time job on top of this. And he hung in. He did a great job.
Well done, Tyler. You were invited back.
He's finding his way to my heart with food.
I know he is. Well, now that you guys live in the same area, you're going to have to become more amicable after kind of a frosty dynamic there for a couple of years on Fantasy Football Now, which, by the way, airs Sunday, 10 a.m. Eastern Time on ESPN2. Everything that you need to know to get your lineup set for Week 13. We got all kinds of injury updates, daily fantasy thoughts. We've got long shots. We got rankings, reporters, and
most importantly,
Red Zone
Dad joke.
Dad joke coming your way via Mike Clay, the man who can tell them like nobody else can. Great stuff from Kevin Pulsifer, Mike Clay. I'm Field Yates. We'll see you guys on Monday right here on Fantasy Focus.